It's new OS day around here, so it's these kind of, as we're recording right now, I think they're still in beta because they're not available, but they will be available by the time this episode comes out. And
it's okay because the 0.1s are also still in beta and will remain in beta until they release next month, right?
Yes,
so
very
sure.
good point.
Okay, there's always more betas.
And this is probably a historical day because today, iOS 18, iPadOS 18, watchOS 11, macOS Sequoia, and VisionOS 2 are released. This is probably the most released from Apple ever, like the most operating systems in a day, because we now have VisionOS in the fray.
Mm-hmm.
You have written what reviews have you written this year?
I have a macOS review, an iPadOS adjunct to Dan Moren's iOS review.
Okay.
I have a piece that's going up later about my feelings about the new changes to the Photos app, and then Dan's got his iOS 18 piece. I want to write something about the watch. I haven't gotten there yet, and it may be in conjunction with the actual new watch as well. And I need to write more about VisionOS, although I already wrote about when that VisionOS 2 developer beta came out, and it's great. I don't know. There's nobody who is using a Vision Pro who should not be on VisionOS 2. Bottom line.
Yeah.
Just do it.
It's absolutely the right version.
Just do it.
Of it. What was it like to write the macOS review this year? I know that I've been talking to John Voorhees about his, and it seems like a bit of a struggle, to be honest.
So one of the challenges is Apple Intelligence is hanging over everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's true of all of these reviews. It's just hanging out there. The main event is not here. This review this release is like a bunch of the side stuff, but there's this thing that Apple has leaned on as the most impressive thing that they're doing, and it's not there, which is weird.
Yeah.
So that's a weird feeling. And I would say also, yes, in the beta process, a lot of features were just sort of like being added as they went and being changed as they went. I felt like there was a lot of stuff that was way more movable this summer than it has been in the past, and that can be a challenge as well. So the way I've for the last few years, the way I've written my review is I write a public beta story, right? When the public beta comes out. So that gives me a few weeks after they announce to spend time with it and then write a story about the public beta. But the public beta, I'm not being judgmental about it. It's a public beta. It's early days. They've got the summer to fix things. That's why it's a beta. And so I will make observations about, this thing is missing. This thing doesn't work right. I don't know about this thing yet. And then in the fall, I come back to the close to final and I recheck everything and see what progress they've made. And I don't know if there's been an OS version that made more progress over the summer than Sequoia, where a bunch of stuff changed. And a bunch of stuff that I complained about in July is just fixed. So I deleted a lot of stuff from parts of it, which is good news, right? But it also shows you that they were shipping things in June that were, maybe they did some changes based on feedback, but I think a lot of it was also they were making changes because they were putting things in that were not feature complete in order to get them in the beta, and then they added them on as they went. So it's been an interesting process.
Yeah, I haven't really spent any time with Sequoia, and I don't never really play around with the Mac betas anyway. But you were sharing some stuff with me, and I thought that you had just like a really good way of talking about there being this there's just this like cloud that's hanging over everything, which is the actual version of iOS 18, and more than
and macOS 15,
sorry,
right?
all of the I keep thinking of that, but all of the point ones is what I was trying to say, right? Like all of the point ones for the major platforms include the big thing, right? Which is, and every year this happens. This has been happening for a long time, that like point 1, point 2, point 3 have features in them and we know they're coming, but it is much rarer for like what feels like the entire point of having the new operating system to not be in the initial shipping version. And you can kind of feel how you'd like about Apple Intelligence, but if you are looking at the company and thinking about the company in the way that we do, it is clear that this is actually what they care about. But they don't have anything to show for it today, which is...
Yeah.
This is also that function of the iPhone controlling everything. It doesn't make sense to ship iOS 18 right now. Like, they should ship iOS 18 in October, right? They ship iOS 18 and it includes a beta for Apple Intelligence. But what are you going to do about the iPhone? So you kind of have to ship it now. And it's just like one of these funny things about, like, we were always talking about this, right? How the iPhone just dictates everything. And that's why 0.0 of all of this stuff is coming out today, because the iPhone comes out on Friday. And they can't ship it with 17 on it. So here we are.
Yeah, so here we are. Yeah, and it's, I mean, I could ask, are the intelligence features far behind enough that you had to delay them to October? I think what we're seeing here is Apple hedging. I think in June, when Apple announced this, they were not convinced there wouldn't be big problems that prevented them from shipping it immediately. And so they said, look, it's not going to be in the first version, and we'll get to it when we get to it soon thereafter. Now they've obviously reached the point where they feel like, yeah, October, we can ship it in October. If they had known that they were this close, would they have pushed it a little and gotten it into 0.0? Maybe? I don't know. I still think that, I mean, there's some worry about how it's going to work, but there's also some worry about just the strain it's going to put on, you know, their servers that they're building, their little private compute cloud thing and all of that. But it is a little curious that they're literally saying, like, oh yeah, in a couple weeks it'll be out. It's just like, well, why didn't you push that? I know you're running full speed here, but like, the developer betas haven't changed that much. So could you have just shipped 18.1 as 18.0 and been fine? Probably, but I think they didn't know that when their initial plan. But so we're left looking at everything else, and it is fine. Like, there are always a spread of features. Like, there's always like the A tier features that are there, that are the big ones. That are like, oh, this is a big change. And then there are a bunch of B tier features that are pretty nice. And then there's like the C tier is just like all of this little tiny detail stuff. So there's still a bunch of B tier features. And depending on the platform, I mean, I would argue that there may be some arguably A tier features, but really Apple Intelligence just obscures it all. So really, you've just got to say Apple Intelligence is the thing that Apple's focused on. That is the #1 feature on all these releases, and it's not there. So we're left with the rest, and it's a little bit weird. And I feel bad for some of the features. Like on the Mac, the iPhone mirroring feature is really nice, and I think will make people's lives better. And I think that Apple's pitch for it was actually really smart, having used it now, because they talked a lot about using Notification Center as the method to get to phone mirroring, and I've found that that's actually true. The idea that I don't often go, oh, I shall bring up my iPhone now and look at what is going on, but instead I get a notification on my iPhone, but it comes up on my Mac, and I click on it, and it opens iPhone mirroring to that app that I don't have on my Mac. I'm like, oh, okay, all right, right? Like, now it's all kind of seamless on this one screen that I'm using right now. And they did a good job. It's like, it's smooth. I've got some quibbles, but like in general, it works really well. They fixed a bunch of stuff in the beta. There was complaints I made about mirroring in specific, you know, about like you couldn't edit the home screen. You couldn't add or remove apps and stuff. And they fixed that. You still can't access Control Center, which I find a little bit weird. And you can't force a rotation, which there are apps where they work in both formats, but sometimes it's better in one than the other. And if it supports both sizes, it will always stay vertical, which I don't love.
What if you actually do physically turn the device?
Feature.
Will it do it for you?
No.
Really?
No.
That's
not related to the... No, because your device could be in standby and it's going to run the phone in vertical because most stuff is in vertical. So it's not... No, it's a thing that they should add. They probably will at some point because there are apps where that's nice to be able to force it into horizontal instead of vertical. And they added their little window manager on the Mac, which I don't want to belittle it by saying, oh, they got a little window manager, but
Oh,
that's
like
the whole point. Is it's like
the tiling stuff. Like is that
yeah,
yeah?
it's
Okay.
just it's basic, but like that's the point. Is there are lots of apps out there that do this stuff. Like Moom from my pals over at Manytricks is one of them, but like there are lots of them, and they all do more. But this is something, and it's stock. And if people want more, there are third-party apps to solve it. But this is like a very basic. I want to put this window to the right. I want to put this window to the left, and keyboard shortcuts in order to move and dock, sliding things into the corners and having them resize and dock there. Like it's just nice. It's a well thought out basic feature that is not going to blow the third-party apps, the third-party utilities that really need this to be like, oh, I need it to be in 3, and I need it to, move this thing around when I hold down this key, and like Apple's not going to do any of that stuff. It is once again just trying for like a simple addition for the masses, and it is that. And I don't think it needs to be a lot more complicated. I don't love the fact that you can't change the keyboard shortcuts that it applies, and that they use the globe key, which if you're using a third-party keyboard, you kind of don't have. But again, nice Mac feature. The video conferencing stuff is nice. They have been layering on all the video that you take with your device their own like video synthesis, right? So they had the effects that came in, and the portrait effect and all of that. And so this time they have background replacement, and there are a bunch of images of like Apple Park that you can put behind you, but you can also use your own. And Apple's background replacement tech is really good. And now every single app just gets it if they're using video, because you can set that at the system level. And, they just keep kind of like ratcheting there. It's a nice little feature. Is it enough to upgrade on its own? No, but security updates are probably the reason you update on your own. And I mean, the list goes on. I'll throw out another one here. Safari. I really like hide distracting items. And I know it's kind of like a manual ad blocker, but like, here's the thing. I don't think that websites should be prevented from making money on ads, right? I clearly don't believe that, but I do believe there is a point, and that's why I think it's great that Apple calls this hide distracting items. There is a point where you are trying to read an article, and right next to the words is a video, possibly even overlaying the words, is a video that is auto playing, and it's so, or there's an ad that's blinking, and it's so hard to focus on reading an article when that is in your peripheral vision. And so Apple's basically said, we will let you make it go away, and it disappears like Thanos is snapped. It just into little particles and it goes away. And like, I can't be against that, because that's in my mind, that is a violation of the contract between the reader and the website. If they are making it impossible to read your article in order to load it up with distracting ads, I think it's gone too far. And it puts it in the user's hands to say, no, that ad. And what I found is a lot of times the really distracting ad actually has an ad under it, because they're trying to work around ad blockers. And the ad under it is not distracting because it's not animated or video. So there are a lot of positive things about it. But I've really liked that feature, because there are sites I read that like literally good sites, and then halfway in the middle of the article, they just start playing a video of a completely different article about a different topic. And I know why. I know it's there so that they can run a pre-roll ad and claim that people were watching that video, but it's muted, and like it's a ripoff. It's a ripoff to the advertiser. It's a ripoff. It's bad policy. And now as a user, I can just say, I don't want to see that, and it goes away. And then I can read my article in peace.
Can I give you a quick hit list of the things that I like from the various betas that I've tried?
Sure.
So I've been using iOS and iPadOS 18, and I put watchOS 11 on my watch a couple of days ago as well. So in general, the emoji tapbacks and the text effects in messages are fantastic. Like,
yes,
they are a reason to upgrade to iOS 18. The text effects are so fun. And I think Apple has done an incredibly good job of detecting effects to be added to words. Like, for example, a couple of days ago, I for emphasis on a word, repeated a letter a bunch of times at the end of the word. It's like, thank you, that kind of thing. And it picked that up
Right.
and was like, you should add an effect to the you because you've obviously done something weird to it. So they're doing a good job of that, but also they're just really fun to play around with. And emoji tackbacks, about time.
It is past time, but they are great.
Yeah.
I agree.
The control center, I like the third-party actions. It's fiddly to set up, but you set it up once. I like that you're able to have multiple pages for HomeKit because I can now have a different page with distinct items, one for my home and one for the studio, which I love that I can have that and that can set them up the way that I want to. Game mode is a thing that's been added when you play games, right? And I know that this is doing stuff like it changes some of the thermal properties and gives you more power, but something that it does, spatial audio for iPhone games. Now, this makes a ton of sense to me. I actually think spatial audio makes the most sense for video games on your phone than it does for watching movies and stuff. It just fits really well. Especially if, like, I play a lot of games that have sounds, like not music, but sounds, and I can hear those sounds while I'm listening to a podcast. And this makes a lot of sense because the podcast is up here in my ears, and the sounds from the game are happening down there on my phone. It's actually, I really like it. I think it works pretty well. The new Photos design, it takes some setting up, again, like Control Center, but once you've set it up, you are left with something that works better for you. Like, that's kind of my overall feelings on Photos. Does that jive with you?
Yeah, and like I said, I wrote a piece for my feelings about this. There was a lot of initial backlash to the Photos design, and I think the initial beta was a step too far because it was literally like you could scroll up or down or sideways. I was like, that's a lot of different things happening in one app. And they took out the scroll sideways, and now it's just it opens with two things: the library grid above and collections below. And again, like, I heard from people who are like, oh, I can't believe they did this. I just want my library. I just want my grid of photos that's completely chronologically ordered with the most recent ones at the top. And like, okay, Photos has two things about it. One of them is it's where your system camera roll basically is. And like, you need to be able to get to it to get to that last photo you took. I get it. But the whole point of having a photo library is to look at the photos in the library, I think. And that includes on your devices, not just like back home on a Mac or something. It includes on your devices, especially for like, and I think again, our more computer focused community is maybe over-indexing on, I don't want to see collections. I just want to see a utilitarian grid. And I just don't agree. I think the problem with Apple's, first off, there's this perception it's like, oh, it's just Apple's stupid machine learning stuff trying to recommend a memory for me. And that is on Apple, because that's how Apple pushed this stuff primarily, was with these memories that could be very weird labels, weird collections, and all of that. But like, first off, collections is way more than that. And I think that a lot of them, if you want them to be utilitarian, you can actually make really great utilitarian collections. I would argue that Recent Days and Travel alone, and then People and Pets, where you can now make groups. So you can say, I want to see all the pictures of these 4 people together, and make a person group as well. Like, those are utilitarian. Those are, you could scroll back through a grid forever in order to find something. You should probably use search, which, by the way, is also incredibly better now than it used to be. You can just search for plain text, essentially, like, find me all the photos of Jamie on a beach in Hawaii, and you just type it and it comes out, and it's exactly right, which is amazing.
That's cool.
But the, like, Recent Days, like, when you get to that open screen, yeah, you can scroll back. It's like, when a few days ago I did this thing. Well, yeah, or you could look at Recent Days and go back 3 days and go, there it is, and tap and see all the photos from that day. Like, it is utilitarian. If you want to go beyond that, they're also generating favorites or generating memories and featured photos and stuff like that. And you can customize it, like you said. You can pin things. You can move the order around to make it be what you want. But like, Apple is trying to serve two purposes here, because Apple feels, and I think they're right, that hiding all of the curation behind a tab and having everybody's main interface be a featureless grid is a mistake. And they're right. It is a mistake because it's bad user interface. Featureless grid is not the right way to do it. There are use cases where featureless grid is the right thing. It's the utilitarian, I need to go and find that thing I just did. There it is, got it, right? But like if that's all Photos is, there's something wrong because there's so much else going on. And I firmly believe that a huge percentage of regular users never tap on the tabs and are not aware what Apple is doing behind the scenes to organize their photos. And why do we have hundreds of thousands of photos in our photos library if it is not to look at them? And Apple trying to find ways to get you to look at them again and surface them is part of the reason the app exists. So I'm a big fan. I think this is the right thing to do. And I think if people are grousing about, oh, I only want to see a grid, like how are you using your photos library? And maybe consider looking at the utilitarian features and collections, because their recent days alone is very helpful in just coalescing your photos down into the most recent days, or travel that coalesces your trips based on your GPS and time data so that you can just say, where is that trip I took? And instead of scrolling back a year to find that trip you took, you look at trips and you go back 4 and you're like, oh, that trip, and you tap on it. It's the right thing to do. So I think they nailed it.
I also like that the grid of photos at the top, you can choose how it's displayed, whether you want it to be displayed in date order or added order, like when added to the library. I love that you can do that, because I would often find myself trying to find an image, but it's like, is it in recents or is it in like my library? But you can just choose. And by default, my choice is I want to see things when they were added to my library, because that makes more logical sense to my mind.
And to be clear, Photos has been using machine learning for a decade, and none of the features I've mentioned are Apple Intelligence. I think the only Apple Intelligence features in Photos are cleanup, which removes things from the background, which works really well. Not perfect, but none of these things are, but it works really well. And there's a like freeform text to make it generate a memory movie and stuff for you. That's an AI feature. But
super
the rest
good
of
UI.
it,
oh my god, the UI for that feature is so good.
Yeah,
it's
with all
so
the things
fun.
flying in and the lasers and stuff. Yeah,
and it
there's
shows
a lot
you
going
like,
on there.
the
But
words it's searching to collate what you're looking for. It's very, very good. Very good UI.
Yeah, I wanted to mention the Passwords app.
Oh yeah, okay. I haven't really paid any attention to it.
It's good. I have dealt with performance issues when importing. I have a big 1Password library. It's like 2,000 passwords, and it bogs down. It bogs down. Yeah, well, I don't know. I've been using it a long time, right? So it really bogs down, and I think it's a problem. And then deleting them is also really slow. It gets slow. I think they've got some work to do there. And then I think Passwords as an app is so good that what it does, especially if you're coming from 1Password, is reveal all the ways that I think Apple still fails at dealing with this, because I've been using it for the last few weeks full time. And what I found is then I come to a website that wants to use my credit card, and it doesn't autofill from Apple for some reason from the wallet, because that's not in Passwords, it's in the wallet. But if I'm not going to use 1Password, then I'm using Apple's wallet stuff. And I come to websites where it won't autofill, or it won't autofill the date, and it won't autofill the little CVV code.
Yep.
And trying to get that out of Apple Wallet is awful.
And 1Password does a very good job of brute forcing those kinds of scenarios, I think.
And if it fails, use a keyboard shortcut to call up your credit card and grab and copy and paste the dates and codes out of it. And Apple it's not good enough there. Apple Wallet feels very much like they've sort of moved on from autofilling in the browser because they want you to use Apple Pay. But the fact is, the reality, I'm not always using Apple Pay on websites. That's just how it is. And they don't do as good a job of that. And there's other similar data I was asked to put in my driver's license. I was like, oh boy. And like, you can keep that in a locked note or something, but there's other personal information that it doesn't do as good a job about. I also have some import errors that happened to me where I would try to log into a website using Passwords and it would say the password is wrong. And I would look in Passwords and it was the wrong password. It was like an old password, but in 1Password, from which it had imported the data, is the right password. So I had to do a bunch of like cleanup there too. So I guess what I'm saying is it's good. Apple's progress is good, but there are still things that, in terms of autofill, that it needs to do a better job of. Because right now, if I was not also having my 1Password app is still on my system, I guess what I'm saying is I try to use passwords all the time, and Apple's adjunct things that are like what's in 1Password, and I end up having to go back to 1Password more than I expected, and that's not great. So it's a good step, but I feel like there's more to do there, and the app needs to get a little bit better. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. I did like Math Notes is nice. Math Notes has come along.
Yeah, I like that
over the summer.
Yeah,
it was kind of bad at the beginning of the summer, and it's much better now. So it still has some quirks where you want to use variables and it thinks you're doing something different, and every now and then I write something and it gets the little squiggle under it, and I tap to see like what does Math Notes think this is, and it thinks it's some complex math equation, and I'm like, oh no, that's just a letter. Why are you doing this? But I really like, and this also featured that like makes sense to real people, regular non-computer nerd people, because I described
and it works
this to
very
Lauren,
well, and it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, Lauren's response was something like, "Oh, yeah, trying to do math when you have to type it in with a keyboard is impossible because it's really bad. That's like, this is one of those things that our keyboards weren't really made for, and that we all learned how to do the math with our hands, and you're writing the equations and all of that, and like Math Notes just does that. It's actually pretty great. So yeah, there's a bunch of good stuff in there. It's just that we're also just waiting for the main the main event to happen, and that's Apple Intelligence.
I have a couple of little bits. So you're talking about like great ways to surface your photos. Allow me to extol the virtues of the Apple Watch Photos face. It rules.
Yes.
It's so good. It's so good.
So the way it works is you start on your phone and you pick some photos.
Or you pick,
and you can
like
pick one, up to 24.
You can also pick just like, not images, but like, show me photos of this person. You can do that too.
So, and what happens is they are analyzed. And they are cropped on the phone based on a machine learning analysis of what the key images are that you want to see, because obviously a photo is not the same shape as an Apple Watch. So it tries to keep the subjects of your photo in view. It does a pretty good job. It's not perfect, but it's better than not doing it at all. Very impressive. And you can also have the time be dynamic. And what that means is it will make the time bigger or smaller based on the content and the spaces around the content in the photos. And again, not perfect, but pretty good. For example, there's a photo that's got me and Lauren, and there's some space to the side, and it wraps it puts the time on the left wrapped, so it's the first two digits are at the top and the bottom two digits are at the bottom, because it knows that's the space it's squeezed into. But for another photo, we might be at the bottom, and it puts it above, and it uses the depth effect to actually like have our heads be a little bit in front of the time. And then in another photo, it might say, I can't do that here, and it tries to put it in the least obtrusive place in front of us. But there's a lot of stuff going on for that the new photos face on the Apple Watch.
Yeah, my recommendation is, if you want to try it out, go in and set it up like it has like a few things. It's kind of like the lock screen, right? You can choose pictures of nature, I think pictures of pets, pictures of buildings, like architecture, or cities, I think they call it, and pictures of people. So I set mine up to be like nature, cities, and pictures of my wife. And then every day it gives you a new set of images. So like, and then they scroll throughout the day, and you can also just tap on the watch face and it will cycle through them. And it's doing that thing like the lock screen, like as Jason said, like sometimes it's a picture of my wife and the time part of it is behind her head, right? And you can also have two complications on it too, which I think is fantastic. So I have the date and I have the weather. And I think now I'm like 90% sure this is going to be my watch face now, because it brings me happiness when I look at my watch. Like, it's joyful to me because I get to see these photos of things that I care about. I think this is incredible. They've done a fantastic job with this. It's like they took the lock screen photo shuffle, shrunk it down, and put it on the watch, and I think they did a really good job of it. I like more widgets. There are much more widgets on the Apple Watch. I like the suggestions. I like that you can kind of say, like, don't suggest this to me, or do suggest this to me. I think that's pretty good. One of the new widgets that I like a lot is the workout one, where you can just start your 3 most recent workout types just from a widget. I think that's really good. I like the Vitals thing. It's just like a cool app to have. And then just because I don't want it to feel left out, we mentioned VisionOS 2 a little bit. The new gestures for going to the home screen, bringing up Control Center and stuff, it's so much more natural in the way they were doing it before. And then, the new environments and stuff like that. Like VisionOS 2 is a good leap forward. And as Jason mentioned earlier, which I agree with, if you have a Vision Pro, you should be on VisionOS 2 because it just makes everything a little bit better. But yeah, this is part 1 of iOS 18. We'll be doing this all over again, I guess, in like a month. And then maybe again, like 2 months later, as we add in all these Apple Intelligence features. But some good stuff out there.
Since this is a real retrospective episode as well, because it's our anniversary, I'm going to say I had a late idea when I was trying to figure out what the opening photo for my macOS review was going to be that I really like, and I've mentioned it in passing here before, so I'll just mention it here. It's an Easter egg, but I love it, which is it's macOS Sequoia, which is named after the national park, as we discovered when we were measuring for the California Bear Trophy, but it's also the tree. The park is named for the tree. Sequoia is the redwood, and there's a bunch of different kinds of redwoods. There's the giant sequoias, and there's the California coastal redwoods. There is a redwood tree in my backyard, a sequoia in my backyard.
Nice.
And I have spent the last 20 years writing and editing OS reviews in the summertime under that tree. That's my favorite place to be, to work on stuff in the summertime. I sit out there in a camp chair and I work under the tree. And it's a Sequoia. So my art for the macOS review this time is literally a Mac running the new awesome classic Mac screensaver under the tree because it's a Sequoia and it's macOS Sequoia. And I don't, it made me happy to be like, yeah, I got it. I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to show the tree. So there it is.
Very nice.
Tree. Me and my tree.